Welcome to The Journey. My name is Kevin Polky, and I am the host of The Journey. And The Journey is a show that focuses on stories of transformation as well as reflections along our own journey. Um, a few years ago, 7 years ago specifically, I started being very intentional about this idea of looking at the concept of resiliency. Even more important was, how do we help develop resilience within others, specifically students? This probably first was spurred on by a friend of mine, Corbin Tyson, had introduced me to some of Ryan Holiday's work. The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, Stillness is the Key was the first three books that I read of Holiday's. Holiday was had been involved with business and marketing, and at this time he was primarily looking at how to utilize the ancient wisdom of the Stoics and how to apply that to current leadership models and current life. I enjoyed those books for a handful of different reasons. I think mostly it would seem to be very straightforward and practical, of taking these ancient wisdom concepts and then applying them to historical figures such as US Ulysses S. Grant, Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Teddy Roosevelt, Martin Luther King Jr., a handful of different individuals throughout our history, and how did these how to bring those ancient concepts to more of a modern time, or stories that we may have heard before. As I did further research and looked into some of the social scientists that had done specific research on what were some of the critical steps to developing resilience with students, that came down to most of the research had some very similar themes. That the very first thing was this attitude of gratefulness, that being able to be grateful, and focusing on something that you are grateful for. What I usually use in my workshops is something that the participants, I invite them to reflect, and what are they grateful for in the past week. Similar, when I do my consult groups with my clinical team at KP, we start every one of our meetings off with identifying one thing that we're grateful for in the past week. And then at Red Oak Counseling, my company in Milwaukee that I lead, we do that with the clinical lead meetings. So my clinical supervisors, we start off our meetings with that. And I'm going to be introducing it as well to my leadership team at Sherman Counseling up in the Appleton, Green Bay area. What I've noticed when I start off with that question, first with myself, is that regardless of the mindset I am in prior to that, when I take the time to reflect on what I'm grateful for and then write that down and then share that with others, a couple different things happen. One, I go from potentially, maybe depending on the mindset, maybe a closed mindset or a critical mindset or a negative mindset, to being more open. And I think that is a huge piece. And then when we're in a group and I hear other people sharing what they're grateful for, I may find out things that I wouldn't have found out if they wouldn't have shared or wouldn't have even been asked that question. So this idea of gratitude, I believe that the research, I can see why the research reflects that we first start off with gratitude. The second piece is for the educator to look within themselves at what was a time period where they were resilient, where they overcame an obstacle, and what did they learn from that obstacle that they worked through. Uh, as they had different types of setbacks in life, how were they able to um, learn things about themselves that they wouldn't have learned if that setback or obstacle wasn't there? So these two things, I think, are key when developing resilience, and looking at helping develop resilience with others, regardless if that is if you're in the working profession when you're around other individuals, or if you are just with uh, family members or friends, being able to have that attitude of gratefulness and then being able to encourage or maybe suggest slash coach someone as they're struggling with whatever that setback is that they may have. What we know, though, for sure, is that to develop resilience, which is something that I believe wholeheartedly, is that we're not born with resilience. We develop it over time, and we develop it over time because they are inevitably in our life. There's going to be things that are going to be obstacles and setbacks and detours that it takes uh, an aspect of grit, takes an aspect of intention and discipline, um, an aspect of faith that we may not know where we're um, where we're going to be able to as we stumble to get back up, but we know that staying down, um, or staying buried with that obstacle on top of us is not necessarily going to change our circumstance for us. So we know that we have to get up and we have to push through with intention and with discipline and a willingness for to be open for a different perspective. During this time period, we uh, nationally and sometimes even outside the borders of the United States during this month of November, we collectively focus on and celebrate um, a thankfulness called the holiday of Thanksgiving. I wrote something a while ago, and I wanted to share with you um, these thoughts. And I'd like to invite you in to meditate and contemplate on these thoughts. A question came to my mind. When are the trees most beautiful? When they're budding? When they're fully green? When they're full of color? Or when the trees are bare? There is beauty in all because they're all exactly how they were designed to be. The invitation is to choose to see beauty in all things. Obviously, when we have some aspect of a success or victory, it's easy or easier to focus on the gratitude at that time period. But when the trees is bare, when our time period that it feels like it's a season of winter, recognize that that also in itself has its beauty. It may be different than it was a season or two earlier, but doesn't necessarily make it any less of that beauty. And also recognizing that it's in this season, this time period, also serves as a function and a purpose. So not to lose heart, because if we continue and endure the winter, the spring will come. As always, I appreciate you being here and appreciate the comments and sharing this with someone who may need to hear it. As always, I enjoy you being here and grateful for you and look forward to being with you next week.